first I want to say.
Oh, gosh. What? What do you want to say?
That was so funny. You were talking about your friends and being liked and being popular, what have you. You said, I bet my friends think I'm crazy for having a podcast where I'm talking about being an alcoholic.
Oh, yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah.
That was very funny.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I'll lose some friends over this, but then they're not really friends.
That's right. People that mind don't matter. People that matter don't mind.
Yeah. And I remember when I was in the halfway house, someone saying that if you had, even one person in your life who truly knew you and loved you, that was wealth, a wealth of, that's a lot. And I have a network of women who know me well and who I love.
How many Facebook friends do you have?
I don't know. What is this turning into now?
You've got I think you've got 1,300 or 1,400.
Maybe now I have.
Isn't that crazy?
I may have 800 after this.
I think I'm behind you. I'm at 12. At Louie's house, I had MySpace.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yes. I think I had a MySpace page.
I like MySpace because your profile, you could have music playing.
Yeah.
You could really, cater it to, you could make all kinds of changes and backgrounds. And
yeah.
It was really cool.
It was really your space.
Yeah. I don't know why they changed to Facebook. Getting sober.
Oh, it's so...
We want to talk about the conversation we had, which was actually a controversial conversation that we had, and we talk about a lot, when a family friend of ours asked, what was it that allows some people to get it and some people don't? So some people get sober, seem to thrive and live many, many years happily ever after. Some people struggle for years and years and years and can never get it. So what is it that enables someone to get it, although you never get it? It's a daily reprieve. But do you remember what we answered?
Yeah, our enablers stopped enabling us.
Right. Our enablers.
That was the best conclusion that I think we weren't like, oh yeah, this is the answer. I think it was like a discussion with her, and ultimately we came to the conclusion that for sure was, for us, rehab is a big part of why we got sober and how we got sober. That in the end I was backed into a corner where I had no other options. I knew Mom wasn't coming to get me, Dad wasn't going to come get me. I wanted my job, so I had to go to rehab and stay.
So years ago, I was having a conversation with an earth person. And
what do you mean by earth person?
They're not an alcoholic.
Not everybody knows.
Yeah. But I shared that story with them, and they were incensed by it.
What do you mean? Like house?
They were like, how could you say that? Why do you think they were incensed by it?
Maybe they have someone in their life who's in active addiction and they don't want to cut off?
No. And it was a good point. I never thought of it. He said, that puts responsibility on them. That it was their fault, right? That they enabled you, and that's what kept you drinking. And when he said that, I was like, he's actually got a point. I think that it's a fine line, because I think it is true that, certainly when people in my support network had enough and got to a point where they were like, no more, that certainly had a huge impact on me getting sober. You could probably say that had they not said that, I probably would never have stopped, because I wouldn't have had a reason to.
Right.
But in my mind, that doesn't translate to them having responsibility. because the responsibility was mine. But
Right.
I see both sides of it. What do you think?
Well, first, I think that why some people get it and why some people don't is, for me, I'll never fully understand. There is no logic or reasoning when it comes to the disease of addiction. There is no logic. Like
Right.
people who are earth people say, how could they do that how could they, sell drugs when they've got 2 small children at home? How could they keep using drugs despite their job and all the success? It's not a choice in active addiction. There's no reasoning to it. I don't want to, I have thoughts on why some people get it and why some people don't, but I think there are stories that, I think there are aspects of life that we just are beyond us, that because we're human and we're not God. As far as enablers, this may sound harsh. Their addiction, we all play a part. Somebody said once that in Al-Anon described addiction as like a boat or a piece of furniture, and all the family members and loved ones and the addict or alcoholic, everybody has a role in continuing to if let's say you have to keep the boat above ground, right? Or you're walking the boat down to the river. Everybody plays a role in carrying the boat. And as people step away from the boat, it gets harder and harder for the alcoholic or drug addict to hold the boat.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, people are playing a role in the persistence of the disease. Now, and so I do think that enabling, we're, as active alcoholics and drug addicts, we look for people to facilitate our ability to keep using.
Right.
And as it progresses, maybe that gets harder, but things like denial and this is my child, I can't imagine leaving them in jail. If I don't let them come back, they leave rehab against medical advice and then they want to come back home and I say no, what if they die overnight? And then it's my fault. These are all valid, real things that people have to deal with. Yeah. And sometimes they do die,
right. Oh yeah.
But if you let them back in your house, they could die. Right. They could get drugs and come to the bedroom and OD. It's just
or certainly not going to get better.
Right. So when we said that also, that wasn't our intention, was to put responsibility on our parents. But as someone who has someone in their life, like go to my sister, when she was still drinking, and I made a choice in the end to not have her be a part of my life because it was too painful. And healthy behavior, a healthy response to a drug addict or an alcoholic is no. It's not normal to continue, it's not healthy to continue to let them steal from you fiscally and steal from you emotionally. And again, I'm not saying that's easy. If you were to relapse, abuse our children, blow our savings, drive drunk with the children in the car, it wouldn't be healthy for me to allow you to continue to be in the kids' lives.
Right.
Until you could get, I'm not saying ever, but that's teaching them that it's okay for you to act like that. So it's not easy. It's not easy. And it's not black and white, and it doesn't look like the same for everybody. But do I think that people play a role in the addict or alcoholic's ability to continue using? Unfortunately, it may sound harsh. Yes. That's what enabling is. And so remember the wise person who I referenced earlier in treatment, she said every active alcoholic or drug addict has a keeper somewhere.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I see both sides, because you could look at it like you're assigning blame. You could also look at it as you're, assigning praise, because, I think it's the family's default. It's no fault of their own that they enable. I think that's default, our default mode. I mean, especially parents. Yeah. It's in our DNA to protect our children. It's instinct. It's not something we can turn off. And when they are in pain and they are suffering, our instinct is to protect them. And I think that is what leads to enabling. It's certainly not the intention, but that's the default. You have to intentionally do something different. The families have to intentionally do something different after the family has experienced enough pain to recognize that what they're doing to try to fix their loved one isn't working. And that's where, the boundaries and detachment starts. And for me, and I know for you, that was the thing that set the stage for me getting better. And in saying that, it's giving them praise, because they're the ones who, ultimately kind of lifted me up. I look at it as like I was continually backing myself into a corner to where my options got fewer and fewer and fewer, and more grim and bleak. And in the end, my options were, I was in detox, and my options were walk out the door with no support and no skills to take care of myself, or accept treatment. And that was a gift that they gave me. So I see both sides. But it's a good segue into getting sober, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought today we'd talk about getting sober.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah. So what happened in the end, the last time?
Yes. This is the end, my only friend, the end. Who sang that song?
I don't know.
What?
Is it somebody really old?
What do you mean really old?
Like, are they dead now?
They are dead.
Frank Sinatra.
Actually, he died of alcoholism. There was a movie about him that was played by an actor who was...
He died of active alcoholism?
Yes. He was like 30-something years
Elvis?
old. No.
He died of drug addiction, didn't he? Essentially?
Yeah. No,
he was like you. He liked things to make him go up and then things to make him
Elvis
go down.
died on the toilet and had an...
Haven't other famous people died in bathrooms?
Oh, yeah. Whitney Houston died in the tub. So did her daughter. But Elvis had an obscene amount of stool in his body.
Oh, my gosh.
Because he was on so many opioids that he was constipated.
Well, that's something that I think I could have gone the rest
Isn't that
of my
amazing?
life without. No, but that's amazing.
It's amazing.
So, back to this person who sings what
This
song?
is the end, my only
Do I know this person?
friend, the end.
Have I heard?
I hope so. You want me to sing another song?
No.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
I'm really showing my't right
You are.
now. I should know.
Yeah, I think you should. Jim Morrison.
Oh.
What band?
Is that the Rolling Stones?
No. Not the wall.
This is so bad.
Not the wall. Not the window, but the
Doors.
Doors.
Yeah, I've never been a big Doors fan, obviously.
Yeah, so the end.
But I can tell you a little bit about Bach and Beethoven.
Yeah. Nobody cares about that.
I do.
I always enjoy hearing your story because it's a compelling story.
In May of 2006, I graduated nursing school, and I'd always kind of had school or living with a parent or roommates to somewhat keep me in check as far as the drinking. But when I graduated, I was done with school and, moved out on my own, and in part wanted to live on my own so I could do whatever I wanted to. And I believe my lease started in July. You have to pass boards and all that stuff. So I started working in July of 2006 and got hospitalized in April of 2007. So roughly 10 months. But in that 10 months, I was working night shift. I thought on some level, so again, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, I knew my drinking didn't look like it should, but I didn't think I was an alcoholic. So anyway, in those 10 months, I thought, I did think night shift would help with my drinking because I'd never been a big daytime drinker unless it was game day, tailgating at Georgia, which those were usually didn't make it to the stadium anyway. But in those 10 months, I would work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and get off work and could barely stand the 5-minute drive over the bridge back to my house so I could start drinking. And I would drink mostly shots of cheap vodka, and then I'd pass out somewhere between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And every day I did that, I would say, I'm not going to overshoot the mark. I'm not going to have that much today, and I would always pass out. Came to on the kitchen floor, or came to somewhere in the house, and would go do it all over again. Somewhere around 5 o'clock, I'd get up, get dressed for work, and go back in and do it all over again. And it was in that house where I can remember looking in the mirror, hating who I saw, absolutely hating, having the realization that I didn't, how did I get here? I hate who I am. This is not who I wanted to be. Surrounded by physicians, my cousins are physicians, father, uncle, these successful people, and I was just this miserable shell of an existence. And I hated who I saw, I hated my life, but I had no clue that the alcohol was what was causing all that. No clue, which is crazy that I didn't, but I didn't know that was the problem. I didn't know how to fix the problem, obviously, because I didn't know what the problem was. And somewhere in those last few months of my drinking, I would go to my mom's house to do laundry. She said I couldn't come to her house anymore. And she used to say things like, and this is painful, but it's the reality, I'm waiting to come over here and find you dead. And I really thought she was being dramatic, but she wasn't. The reality was I could have aspirated on my own vomit. I passed out with the oven on, stove on,
I've done that
come
too.
to lying on the kitchen floor. Like the reality was I very well could have died.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of why I remember asking God to help me. Of course, the help I received was not the package. It arrived in a package I wasn't planning on, but I wouldn't trade it today. But do I believe that something outside of myself, God intervened? Yes, I do. But when I say that, I don't mean that people who die of drug overdoses or die of active addiction, I don't mean that God isn't in their life or that I'm special. So I feel like that's where it gets, I feel like it was just the perfect storm of grace and pancreatitis and my family being kind of done,
When did you start feeling the pain of the pancreatitis? And when did you realize that, oh shoot, I've got to go to the hospital?
So a couple weeks before, I went in the hospital on Monday, it was a Monday, April 30th of 2007. And I started a couple weeks before this, and I don't know if it was 1 week or 3 weeks, but I went into work and was getting a report on my patient for the night, and I just started having a panic attack. And I had a lot of panic attacks towards the end of my drinking when I wasn't, when I was sober, because it's just my body needed alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
A nurse drove me home, and I never never went back. So I, over those next, again, I don't know if it was a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but through, it was after Master's Week, which is the first full week in April, so maybe 2 weeks, and then I got hospitalized April 30th, but I just drank around the clock and called in sick. And in those few weeks, I started having some pain, and I started having leg cramps, and my feet were swelling and my ankles were swelling. So I knew on some level my electrolytes were probably out of whack. And in full disclosure, bulimia was, in full, going full force, which didn't help. Mm-hmm. But on the Friday before that Monday, I started having bad pain. And then over the weekend, so on that Friday, I started, something inside of me said, this is not good.
Did you think pancreatitis?
No. But I do remember in nursing school, the lecture that included pancreatitis talking about giving the example, our professor, giving the example in class of, acute pancreatitis can happen if you go on spring break and you consume a lot of alcohol on a cruise or a trip, that could trigger acute pancreatitis. But I didn't think this is pancreatitis, but I was scared. But I couldn't stop drinking. So over that weekend, my last episode of drinking was chugging vodka, being nauseated, but chugging vodka, it burning all the way down my esophagus because it was raw from engaging in the purging aspect of bulimia, and then just consuming all that alcohol, so burning all the way down, and then being so sick, I really wasn't eating a lot that weekend, but anyway, that I couldn't keep it down. So starting to have some symptoms of withdrawal because I couldn't keep down what I was used to keeping down. So shaking, hot, sweating, freezing.
Was it like a sharp pain in your abdomen?
Yeah.
Was it like a cramp, or was it bad?
It was bad.
Bad, yeah.
Some people say it's worse than childbirth.
Ooh.
And so on that Monday, I called my dad.
Yeah.
And because he's a physician, a gastroenterologist, ironically retired now, but I would talk to my mom the whole weekend, and she over the phone, because I wasn't allowed to go to her house, but she was like, please call your dad, please call your dad. And I was scared to call dad because I figured he'd say you need to go to the hospital. So I called my dad, and he said, you probably need some fluids, you're probably dehydrated, because he knew about what I was doing, the kind of life I was leading. And so one of his partners saw me, and I lied about the amount of alcohol I was drinking until the images they took of my insides couldn't lie. So I was in, Dad got me in with an appointment that morning, and I can remember.
Did you go in an ambulance or?
No, Mom drove me, and the doctor was doing my physical exam. He was like, your heart rate's 150, and yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, and he was very serious.
Was that from the pancreatitis, or were you just so
I'm sure
stressed?
I was crazy dehydrated, and the pancreatitis, all of it. And being super nervous, needing a drink, all of it could cause a high heart rate. So, and then he asked me, how, in a normal health history kind of way, like, do you drink? And I was like, yeah, I drink a little. I've been drinking a little more, 2 to 3 glasses of wine a night, but I've been drinking a little more lately because I've been stressed. All lies. So anyway, he thought it was pancreatitis, but he thought it was more like gallstone pancreatitis, not alcohol-induced pancreatitis. So he admitted me to the hospital, and I can remember us waiting for a bed down at admissions. We walk over to the hospital, we go to admissions, and my mom knew the person working intake, and I was in so much pain, they let me lie down on some chairs in admitting. And then I got admitted to the hospital. They couldn't find an IV because I was so dehydrated and sick. My veins were awful. And then they took me down to CT that night. And I remember CT was right by where my unit was. So I put the sheet over my head, and I begged the transporter because everybody knows everybody. I just said, please don't tell anybody I'm here.
Wow.
I was so embarrassed.
Wow.
So ashamed. And I remember I threw up the contrast. And I was just so sick. And then the doctor came up.
Was your mom with you that whole time?
She didn't go down with me to CT, but she was.
Just your mom, or was...
No, just my mom at that point. So that I remember. A lot of the hospitals say it's fuzzy, but I remember certain points that really stick out. But she was angry. She was angry, and she was scared.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not saying that at all. Like, just like me, when I get really scared, I lash out of fear. I get angry out of fear. And so that's what she was, very stern, just like the physician. I don't know if I say it. I mean, I credit any physician who calls a patient out on their alcoholism, I think should be praised. And I do think people have a responsibility. Anyway, but ultimately it's our responsibility, like you said, and we're the only ones who can get better. But I'm grateful for those people who were in my life who were willing to say, this is not okay.
Right.
Because it helped me come to terms with, this is not okay, Anyway, so they wheeled me back upstairs, and at some point, it seemed like it was late at night. It could have been 4, because I think it was probably late in the afternoon by the time I got admitted, even later, early evening by the time I went to CT, and then late evening by the time the doctor came up, and he sat at the foot of my bed, and he said...
And you knew him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he was my dad's partner, so like, office Christmas parties.
Yeah.
And my perception is all these physicians and their kids, they're all perfect. They all go to
Mm-hmm.
all go to college 4 years, get 4 O's, go on to become physicians. And I'm a little lush in the hospital with pancreatitis. Being treated by one of the nurses who took care of me that week was in my graduating class. That was a real low point.
Wow.
Here I am. So it was a ton of shame. And he sat at the foot of my bed and he said, "How much do you drink?" And I was so embarrassed I couldn't tell him. I just said a lot.
Dang.
And he said, "You can never drink again." And that's when I thought, 99% of me was like, I felt like somebody had said, "We're going to take away your air now." And the other 1% of me was relieved because the secret was out. It gives me chills to think about.
Me too. It's crazy. I can see, because I don't know him well, but I can see him. I can just visualize that scene. And I've seen pictures of you in that state, red face, swollen.
Very
and,
swollen.
Oh, man.
I didn't know this, but at some point during that stay, I was there 10 days in the hospital.
Dang.
He and my mom had a conversation in the hall where he said I might not make it. So,
That's crazy.
So over the next 10 days, people in recovery started showing up. The minister at the church where I grew up, he was in recovery. He brought me a meditation book. I remember looking through the meditation book, like a daily reader, and just reading about this spiritual life, this other life, like this hopeful life. And I wanted it. I wanted that, but it felt so separate from me. It felt like an island really far away that I could never get to.
Yeah.
It felt like where everybody else on the world was living but me. I think in those, I know you don't always say that you felt this way, but as a child, I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of love and support and successes, but no matter what, I always felt like there was a little bit of a gap between me and everybody else. There was something different about me. And as I drank more and more, that separation got bigger because I was leading this, secret life. And did a lot of things I was embarrassed about, ashamed of, regret, and in those last 10 months of drinking too, I can remember, going to the grocery store at 7 a.m. to buy wine when I was out, when I'd gotten off work, and looking at these other people buying groceries at 7 a.m., not wine, wondering what is it that they know that I don't, that they aren't having to put something in their system like I do to just get through the day, So again, that life that I was reading about in those books just seemed like, again, like I didn't have the directions. And 2 women in particular came and sat down and told me their story, kind of like I'm telling now. They didn't point at me and say you're an alcoholic. They didn't say you're bad, that you have to stop drinking. They just shared with me their experience, their strength, and their hope. And they got through to me more than anybody else, because when they told me how they drank, I believed them. They were describing what I'd felt on the inside, they were verbalizing. And so I wanted that. I wanted what they had.
Yeah.
And so they said, if you want what we want, you need to do these things. And also my boss came and said, if you want to keep your job here, we love you, we support you. If you want to keep your job here, you need to go get help. You got to report to the State Board of Nursing.
Who was the one that suggested you go to this treatment center?
Well, at the time, the hospital had a relationship with 2 treatment centers.
Okay.
One was in Alabama.
Yeah.
And one was in Statesboro.
Yeah.
And one of those 2 women had gotten sober in Statesboro.
it was a really popular, still is a really popular treatment center in this area for sure.
But a lot of nurses, because it was a lot. I think the Alabama one was 3 hours away. This one was an hour and a half away. We had heard of Willingway. I don't know if I'm supposed to say the name or not, but I'm not being paid by Willingway to say any of this. But I don't even remember the other being an option. But I think Willingway was just, so I called and gave them all my information, and then they came back and said, they called me back and said, we're recommending 6 to 8 weeks of inpatient treatment and long-term treatment.
Which is a long time.
No, having worked there and written treatment plans.
Yeah, normally it's like the longest, because I worked in the detox unit for a year and a half, and the longest was 5 to 6 weeks. That was what they called a complicated detox. For just straight alcohol, it was 4 weeks.
They said 6 to 8.
6 to 8. That's a long
top
time.
of the class.
And you had already detoxed.
I like superlatives.
You'd been in the hospital for 10 days.
Well, they didn't, but I've been getting Ativan and Demerol.
That's true.
That I love.
Did you ever resist it? Like, did you ever try to say, I don't need this? Why don't I just...
Not that. I tried to resist it when I got there, and they said long-term is 1 to 2 years. And I was like...
How did you resist it? Did you try to get your family in, or?
Your
nursing license was held over your head, so you couldn't.
I just didn't want to. But remember, I had a crush on somebody. Mm-hmm. Remember? So when I got to rehab...
That's why you stayed.
It's a big reason. But so that's how sick I was. I got there and I thought, this is why I've been sent to this rehab, is to meet the man I'm going to marry.
Your dreams.
And actually, I did.
You did.
Several years later. But one of the reasons I was willing to stay at the halfway house in Statesboro was because I thought, I'll see him at meetings.
Wow. That is so funny.
Which was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.
Right.
I mean, honestly, whatever keeps you there. And then it was, my nursing license also was a massive part of, keeping me in treatment. But I was, I'd rather have gone somewhere where I could have stayed 90 days.
Yeah.
Willingway was wonderful. It was like what do they say? We're going to stampede you with bunnies.
A herd of bunnies. Stampeded with a herd of bunnies.
It was like being stampeded with a herd of bunnies. Mm-hmm. And getting to Lee Street was like having to ride a mechanical bull. Like it was hard.
It was militant.
It was in a good way. In a therapeutic
in what
way.
We needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there were no more. We're going to make you feel good. And I don't want to say that my counselor at Willingway was very tough, but things got harder at Lee Street, which is what I needed, historically, if something was hard, I just didn't do it. Or when it got tough, I ran, and that wasn't an option at Lee Street. And I believe it saved my life. Learned that sometimes in life you have to do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
That when things get tough, you stay the course. Mm-hmm. And that if you do that, on the other side of it is a reward far greater than that short-lived reward of running away and getting away from the scary thing.
Gosh, it's so wild to think about you.
Well,
thinking back, as we sit here and talk about it now, it's very, very fond. I have very fond and endearing memories of that time.
Yeah.
It was really hard. And we, at times, really struggled. But at the same time, you said it, you grew up out there. That's where I changed.
Yeah.
That's where I was reborn, literally, into another person that I had never been before.
Yeah.
That's where they taught us
yeah.
the importance of being honest and being willing.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, 16 to 18 years later, that's still very much a part of us.
Yeah.
I still feel really guilty if I'm not honest.
Yeah.
That's where I learned that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I didn't have that going into that.
And that I think is, I will say this, going back to our original topic of how we get sober and what do you think it is that some people get and some people don't. I do think that being dishonest is a lot of what can drive somebody to relapse, or some secret, because it's so hard to sit with.
Absolutely. It's central.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So not only, honesty that I am, and honesty about who and what I am, but then like we're talking about like cash register honesty, or, I do find that if somebody makes it back to a path of recovery, if they don't get honest about whatever it is, it will, a lot of times, in my observation, send them back. And when I'm sitting on something, I get restless, irritable, and discontent.
Well, and at this point, to me, honesty is about living by my values and the principles of AA.
Right.
Like, that's honest. It's not really about telling a lie. I mean, it is, but those aren't the things that we're doing a lot today. Like, we don't typically lie about that.
Right.
It's am I living? That's what I struggle with.
Right.
That's what my default is, to not be honest, not live by my values,
right.
to be lazy, to find the easier, softer way. That's my default, and still slip into that. And that's where then the guilt comes, which is what I learned at Louis' house.
Yeah.
So
I think people, if you can't, and some people can't get honest, but I think if you are if you can and you're unwilling, that will keep people sick. And it's sad to me, because I think back through the years of all the women who, in our recovery circles, the women I've shared honestly with when there's something, and women who've shared with me when they're needing to be honest about something, it's never that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Those secrets that keep us sick, that really, and that's cliche, but it's so true, that, the truth will set you free and that your secrets keep you sick. Sharing it with another person, there's nothing that's worth dying over.
Well, it says it in how it works. Paraphrasing that, you have to, honesty is the main thing, in that some people are constitutionally incapable.
Yeah.
But, and that can be a real struggle.
Yeah.
And I think, so, man, it's good stuff. That's good stuff. Very good.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done.